Learn English through stories, C26 PDF. Adopted and modified by Kulwant Singh Sandhu. Contents: 1. White Fang by Jack London. Chaps 3 and 4. 2. The future tense. 3. Picture dictionary page. 1. White Fang. Chapter 3. Trip up the Mackenzie. In the fall, the Indians put everything from the camp into bags. Then they put the bags into their boats. Some of the boats left, and White Fang understood. He ran out of the camp and through a small river. Then he found a place in the woods and went to sleep. He woke when he heard Gray Beaver. Gray Beaver called his name again and again, then stopped calling and went back to the camp. White Fang played in the woods for a time, but then he suddenly felt afraid. The woods were dark and cold, and the trees made loud noises. He ran back to the camp, but there was nobody there. He sat down and looked up at the sky. He cried sadly to the large night sky. In the morning, he began to run by the river. All day he ran. Sometimes he had to climb high mountains behind the river. Sometimes he had to swim across other, smaller rivers. He always followed the large river on its way. All the time he looked for the gods. He ran all night and the next day. He felt weak and hungry, and his feet hurt badly. Snow began to fall, and he could not find his way easily. Then night fell, and the snow came down more heavily. Then he smelled the gods through the snow on the ground. He left the river and went into the trees. He heard the sounds of the gods and saw Gray Beaver near a fire. He felt afraid, but he walked slowly into the firelight. Gray Beaver saw him and looked at him. White Fang went to him and waited. But Gray Beaver did not hit him. He gave him some meat. White Fang carefully smelled it and then ate it. He sat at Gray Beaver's feet and looked at the fire. He felt warm and happy. This was his place. Some months later, in the middle of December, Gray Beaver went up the Mackenzie River. His son Mitsaw and his wife Klooch went with him. They took 2 sleds. Mitsaw's sled was smaller and lighter than Gray Beaver's, but it carried a lot of food. Gray Beaver and Mitsaw tied White Fang and 6 other dogs to Mitsaw's sled. Lip Lip ran at the front. All day the other dogs ran behind him. They wanted to catch him, but they could not. Because of this, they hated him. In the camp, Lip Lip had to stay near the gods because the other dogs hated him. He was not the most important dog now. At one village, White Fang learned something new. One day a boy cut some meat and some of it fell on the ground. White Fang ate it. The boy ran after him and tried to hit him with a heavy stick. White Fang was very angry. He bit the boy's hand hard. The boy's family came to Gray Beaver, but he spoke angrily to them. He did not hit White Fang. Later that day, some boys from the village began to hit Mitsaw in the woods. White Fang ran angrily to them and they ran away. When Mitsaw told this story in the camp, Gray Beaver gave White Fang a lot of meat. White Fang understood. There were different gods. There were his gods, and there were. He felt afraid, but he walked slowly into the firelight. Other gods. His gods were the most important. They arrived in Gray Beaver's village in April. White Fang was now a year old. He was tall and thin, and his coat was wolf gray. He walked through the village and saw the gods and dogs from the summer. He was not afraid of the older dogs. He could fight them and win. In the summer, he saw Kitch outside the village. He stopped and looked at her. He remembered her, but she did not remember him. He ran to her happily, but she bit him in the face. He ran away from her. He did not understand. Kitch now had new cubs, so she could not remember her older ones. One of her new cubs came to White Fang. White Fang smelled him, and Kitch jumped on him angrily. She bit his face a second time. Then White Fang laughed. This was a she-wolf, and he could not fight her. In the third year of White Fang's life, there was no food on the Mackenzie for a long time. In the summer, the Indians could not find any fish, and in the winter they could not find any wild animals. They ate their leather shoes and the dogs. The old and weak gods died, and the other gods cried all the time. Some of the most intelligent dogs understood, and they went into the woods for food. There, the wolves ate them. White Fang also went into the woods. For months he was very hungry, but he always killed something. Other animals wanted to kill him, but he could run faster than them. Early in the summer, he met Lip Lip in the woods. He was not hungry, but he snarled at Lip Lip. He pushed him to the ground and bit his neck hard. That was the end of Lip Lip. One day, White Fang came to the end of the woods. In front of him he saw the Mackenzie and a village. It was the old village, but it was now in a new place. He left the woods and went to the village. Gray Beaver was not there, but Kluku gave him a fish. He felt happy because he was with the gods again. Chapter 4. The Killer of Dogs. When White Fang was almost 5 years old, Gray Beaver took him on a second trip. This time they went down the Mackenzie, across the mountains and down the Porcupine River to the Yukon River. They stopped in many villages, and in each village White Fang fought the dogs. The dogs often died because they fought in a different way from White Fang. White Fang liked fighting very quickly. He hated being very near another animal because it felt dangerous. He had to feel free. He finished his fights very fast. Usually he won his fights because the village dogs were slower. Sometimes a dog hurt him, but these times were accidents. Usually he was too fast for them. In the summer, Gray Beaver and White Fang arrived at Fort Yukon. It was 1898, and there were thousands of people in the town. These people planned to go up the Yukon to the Klondike because they wanted to find gold. In Fort Yukon, White Fang saw white gods for the first time. A small number of them lived in the town, and other men came from the boats. These boats stopped in the town 2 or 3 times a week. He was very afraid of the white gods because they were stronger than the Indians. But he was not afraid of their dog. They did not fight well. When they ran at him, he jumped away. Then he pushed them to the ground and bit them in the neck. It was easy. Sometimes a dog did not get up after a fight with White Fang. Then White Fang left him to the Indian dogs. They jumped on him and killed him. White Fang never killed a white god's dog. He was too intelligent. The white gods were always angry when their dogs died in a fight. They hit the Indian dogs hard with sticks. White Fang started these fights easily. When the strange dog left the boat, he went to them. They were afraid of him because he was wild. He was dangerous to them and to their gods, so they wanted to fight him. After 2 or 3 of these fights, the white gods always towed their dogs back to their boat. That was the end of the game with the dogs from that boat. After a time, these fights were the only thing in White Fang's life. Gray Beaver had no work for him because he was too happy. He sold leather shoes to the white gods, and he was now rich. White Fang liked the fights, but he was not happy. He did not love an animal or a god because no animal or god loved him. Everybody hated him. The white men in Fort Yukon did not like the white men from the boats. These men were from the south and were weak. The men from Fort Yukon liked the dog fights because the weak men's dogs died. One man liked the fights more than the other men. He watched each fight. Sometimes when a Southland dog died, he shouted happily. He wanted very much. They were afraid of him because he was wild. To buy White Fang. This man's name was Beauty Smith. His name was Beauty because he was very ugly and small. He had large yellow teeth and dirty yellow eyes. The thin hair on his head and face was also dirty yellow. He tried to make friends with White Fang, but White Fang hated him. He always showed his teeth to him and moved away. Then Beauty Smith visited Gray Beaver in his camp. Beauty Smith and Gray Beaver talked for a long time. Gray Beaver did not want to sell White Fang. White Fang was his strongest dog. But Beauty Smith knew Gray Beaver. He visited him often. Each time he took a black bottle with him under his coat. Gray Beaver began to want more and more bottles. In a short time, all his money went on them. Then Beauty Smith talked to him again about White Fang. He wanted to pay for White Fang in bottles, not dollars. This time, Gray Beaver listened. "You catch him, you take him," he said. After 2 days, Beauty Smith told Gray Beaver, "You catch him." That evening, White Fang came quietly into the camp. The bad white god was not there. Gray Beaver came over to him and tied some leather round his neck. He sat down next to White Fang and drank from his bottle. After an hour, Beauty Smith walked into the camp. He stood over White Fang. White Fang snarled up at him. A hand moved down to his head. Suddenly, White Fang tried to bite it. The hand jumped back. Gray Beaver hit White Fang on the head. Beauty Smith went away and came back with a large stick. Gray Beaver gave him the leather and Beauty Smith walked away from White Fang. The leather pulled at White Fang's neck, but he did not move. Then he suddenly jumped at the bad god. Beauty Smith did not move away. He hit White Fang hard with his stick. White Fang fell to the ground. Beauty Smith pulled the leather again, and this time White Fang followed him. In the town, Beauty Smith tied him with the leather and went to bed. White Fang waited an hour. Then he began to bite the leather. When he was free, he went back to Gray Beaver. In the morning, Gray Beaver gave him to Beauty Smith again. Beauty Smith hit him very hard with the stick. He enjoyed hurting him. Then he took White Fang to the town again. This time, he tied him with a stick. In the night, White Fang began to bite the stick. After many hours, he bit through it and was free. He went back to Gray Beaver. He could not leave him. Beauty Smith came for him again the next morning. He hit him harder then. Beauty Smith came back with a large stick. When he finished, White Fang was very sick. He could not see, and he could not walk easily. He followed Beauty Smith back to the town. Gray Beaver said nothing to Beauty Smith because White Fang was not his dog now. After a short time, he left Fort Yukon for the Mackenzie. 2. The future tense. There are other ways of talking about future actions and happenings. You can use going to. We use going to when an event that has already been planned. 1. Last week, they decided they are going to get married in December. 2. We are going to bake a cake this afternoon. 3. I'm sure Mom and Dad are going to be proud of me. 4. When are you going to clean your room? 5. They are going to wash the car for Dad. Going to is also used when there is evidence in the present that emphasizes something will happen. 1. It is nearly 6 o'clock. It is going to get dark very soon. 2. You're going to fall if you don't tie your shoelaces. 3. I'm going to travel to India for vacation next month. 4. He is going to feel sad if you don't invite him to the party. 5. I think I'm going to be sick. Will or going to? 1. Why are you turning on the TV? B. I'm going to watch the news. 2. I forgot my wallet. I don't have any money. B. Not to worry. I'll lend you some. 3. Picture dictionary page.